What does Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2 hide from the player behind the scenes? I'm going to be breaking open every single minigame and area in Help Wanted 2 to show you how this game works from a game developer's point of view, just like I did with the first game. We'll be finding hidden things out of bounds, leftover developer assets, and showing off tons of goofy things that can occur if you break the game. As we move forward, I'll do very short recaps per minigame of everything that happens in it. That way we're all on the same page for when I break it down. So without further ado, let's jump right into the title screen, the hub area, and the backstage minigames. When we first boot up the game, we'll find 3 dapper animatronics posing behind a table and in front of a projector screen. The lights shut off briefly, only to come back with the spooky shadow of Circus Baby now on screen. When viewed from a different perspective, we can see that this introduction sequence takes place atop a small section of checkered flooring. There are a handful of chairs scattered around us, and a projector directly behind the player. Of course, there are the animatronics in front of us as well. Roxy and Wolf, Funtime Freddy, and Funtime Chica are posing for us behind the table. But what happens to them when the lights go out? As the sequence plays out, these characters will be unloaded completely as Circus Baby appears behind us to cast a shadow. After a brief moment, our animatronic friends reappear in front of us, and all 4 of them remain until we start the game. Well, 5 if you count the cupcake anyway. That's not all though, as when we press the new game button, a short introductory video will be played on the projector, and the animatronics will vanish once again. This time the animatronics don't all unload instantly, but instead, Circus Baby vanishes as the others slide down through the floor and do a little spin. They then unload, but they do so gloriously. The Fazbear orientation program then begins on the projector screen. Now, after completely ignoring the company training video, we'll be dropped into this game's hub, where we're free to look around as we please. The hub here is full of various pieces of furniture and interesting props. There are a bunch of arcade machines, a show stage, and of course, the computer we use to navigate the minigames. One of the machines placed here is a capsule dispenser that provides us a toy after each minigame, and I thought I'd be clever and get a glance at our prizes. Unfortunately, this machine was a total scam, and all these capsules are empty. Thanks for crushing my spirits, Cupcake Bonanza. Speaking of which, there are various doors within the hub level that we're not typically able to access. Sadly, the capsule machine was a bad omen for things to come, and these doors don't lead anywhere either. So we've been lied to twice. Oddly enough, the door behind the red ropes extends outside the map and has 2 pieces of metal scaffolding on either side. It's a bit strange, since we would never see this. While here I also saw that the show stage has nothing behind the red curtains, just an empty stage that leads into the void. Now, after completing enough minigames, you'll unlock the Faz Wrench, which in turn allows you to enter the locked closet in the corner of the room. Once this is done, the player can not only access the Princess Quest 4 arcade machine, but also remove the Vanny mask currently attached to their face. In doing so, we'll arrive at the ruined version of the hub world, and we'll now be able to access each of the game's hard mode minigames through the computer. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the ruined DLC, you may have an inkling as to how the player arrives in this disheveled version of the map. When the mask is removed, your screen gets covered by static as it fades to black, and a moment later, we'll have arrived at the destroyed hub. If we zoom out within this level, we'll see that directly beneath the hub, there's a separate version of the map occupying some of our precious void space. Instead of loading in a ton of new map assets each time the Vanny mask is equipped or removed, the player will be warped between these levels while our view is blocked, making it appear as though the map changed around us. Within the destroyed hub, there are a few things for us to look at that differ from its shiny counterpart. The entire level is covered in rust and dirt, and most of the electronics have fallen into disrepair, including our buddy Candy Cadet here in the corner. There are a few key differences between these areas that are worth noting, one of which being the distinct lack of a kitchen behind us. Not cool, Fazbear Entertainment. I was told there would be snacks. Among these changes, there's also a charging station on the back wall, though it's been aged beyond repair and won't be working anytime soon. I guess I should also mention the giant bottomless pit present in the room. As you've probably realized by now, this area is heavily inspired by the hidden burn trap ending in Security Breach. The map's furnishings and layout appears to be a direct reference to that very level, although the sizes of said maps are noticeably different. With that being said, this version of the hub seems to be a much more rundown version of that area, and this is what the level may have looked like in FNAF Ruined, since we only ever get to explore the back half where Burn Trap was. Unfortunately, we can't dive into this giant pit of death since it's fully barricaded off, and even if we could, it would be a terrible idea. Moving the camera below shows us that this menacing sinkhole doesn't lead anywhere, at least not in this version. It's only a direct gateway into the endless void below. I wasn't satisfied yet, so I broke the collision on the barricade and tried walking in, only to realize an invisible floor prevents you from falling in even if you got inside. Now, before moving out from the hub, there's a leftover interaction from the VR version here that I want to mention. By destroying one of the walls and walking outside the map's boundaries, static instantly blocked my screen, so I couldn't see anything. This asset is used in the VR version of the game to prevent the player from sticking their head out of the gameplay area and seeing something they're not supposed to. As you can see from this perspective, whenever I step outside the map, this small flat piece of static appears to obstruct my view. This same method was used in the original Help Wanted as well, which I ran into during Foxy's maze in the Dreadbear DLC. Of course, this is horror scoped after all, so it'll take more than some static to stop me. Your game will be broken. And with that said, let's dive into the first backstage minigame, Arts and Crafts Daycare. So as we hop into this minigame, we'll arrive at the Superstar Daycare, where Sun tells us to get to work. Using the dart gun on the counter, we'll have to select which canvas we'll be painting, and then repeat this to grab a paintbrush as well. The goal is simple: make the canvas in front of us look like the example we're provided. To do so, you'll mix paints and color by number with the intention of matching the other canvas. If we're successful, Sun will take our masterpiece and then, destroy it. Thanks, pal. That definitely won't damage my self-esteem. Next, we'll have to build a papercraft to once again match the example we're given, using the dart gun to obtain whichever pieces we need. You have to avoid shooting the crystal ball looking things, otherwise you'll eventually trigger a moon jump scare. After our hopes and dreams are shredded again, we'll finally do a combination of both, making a papercraft that we must also paint. Recap aside, let's have a closer look at this massive daycare area. Typically, we're unable to move away from our little art station, so there's a lot we can't see within this level. I was really surprised with how large this room is, since the darkness does a good job hiding most of the area from us. The jungle gyms we see in the background are fully modeled inside and out, and so we can navigate the camera through them like we're playing inside. It's interesting to me that so much work went into the environment, knowing the player wouldn't be able to see most of it, but it definitely adds to the immersive feeling when playing in VR. Back at our little art station though, we'll find a pretty unusual sight waiting for us. This scrunched up ball of horror is actually Sun, our friendly neighborhood caretaker, and you'd be surprised to know this isn't some strange yoga pose. At the start of the minigame, Sun will appear from behind our desk, and this is where they're stored until that point. The game is currently paused, but when time is resumed, we can watch as Sun unfolds like some kind of nightmarish transformer, and even clipping through themselves further as it happens. I know you're our caretaker, but you may want to get checked out. That couldn't have felt good. With the minigame now started, there's a few things I want to look at. First, we'll unholster our trusty Peacekeeper. Using the dart gun, we'll select the various items needed to complete all 3 levels of Arts and Crafts. Of course, we can shoot at our caretaker instead, which they're surprisingly not a fan of, but shooting it straight up results in something kind of funny. It turns out the darts can stick to any object within the map that has collision, and the darts we're shooting just so happen to fit that criteria. Because of this fact, the darts can stick to each other and break the concept of physics. Gravity just sort of gives up in this case, and they'll remain static wherever they connect, resulting in a tower of darts floating in midair. This is also worsened when the game is in bullet time, since the darts don't have a chance to get very far before another one gets stuck to it. We've essentially created a dart shield to defend our art station though. Glorious! Using the dart gun for its intended purpose, we'll shoot the photos on these boards to get the pictured item and proceed with our art project. As soon as the dart hits the board, we can see that our item will just kind of appear inside the shelf and fly out onto the table. If the player fails to replicate the canvases shown, we'll get jump scared by the daycare attendant himself. After moving the camera, I intentionally failed the challenge to trigger the jump scare, and Sun broke his neck to look down at the floor. This was a bit confusing at first, but it made sense after I looked beneath the map. The player is warped beneath the map the moment the jump scare begins, where a separate jump scare model for Sun is located, and we can see that the T-pose model will instantly turn upside down and drop down in front of the player's camera. The second the jump scare is over, the model will swap back to the T-pose once again. Moon's jump scare occurs this same way. Space Clown just kills you, and then T-poses over your mangled corpse. Because the player camera has moved down here for the duration, the sun inside the map will follow it regardless of where it goes. This doesn't only apply to the jump scare either, and we can warp the player behind Sun, and he'll once again break his neck to continue looking at us. It's really creepy, since there's nowhere we can go within this map where we won't be watched. And at this point, I saw this small black rectangle clipping through the ground, and I realized that the pause menu is stored beneath the map. So anytime you pause the game or pull your headset off, the camera is warped way beneath the map in a blocked off area. These two blue lines are the pointers from my VR controllers. So just beneath this desk area, we can find two black spheres underground. These are double-faced spheres, so if you're inside, you can't see out, and if you're outside, you can't see in. This is important because if they weren't like this, when the player paused the game, they might be able to see them, because the camera gets moved underground. Let's hop into the hard mode variant of this minigame, Arts and Crafts Loft. In this hard mode level, we'll basically follow the same rules as before, only the canvases are a bit more grim than previously, and our tasks are a bit more demanding. In the Loft, we'll have more colors to throw onto the canvas alongside the constant threat of Moondrop's approach. In order to defend ourselves, we'll employ the use of our trusty flashlight, warding off our attacker while painting and paper crafting. After each task is complete, a disheveled sun will step out of hiding just to destroy our work. So restarting this minigame, we can take a look at the map around us to see how much it has changed. The first thing you'll notice is how much smaller the Loft is compared to the Daycare. It's definitely a lot cozier than the massive map we played in previously, and Sun is living it up in the fort behind the art station. That might be a bit of an exaggeration, as this animatronic has seen better days. Their face is half destroyed, and most of the body has withered away. They're of course not alone on this map, and if we move the camera down beneath the floor, we'll find Moon floating down here. This is the version of Moondrop that moves throughout the Loft, and they're placed here at the start of the night, where they'll remain until Sun disappears. From this angle, it looks like they're climbing from the empty void into the Loft, and it's pretty creepy. Also, the jumpscare model for Eclipse can be found underneath the map, in a similar position as the others in the normal level. Now, after we finish the first task, some will warp outside the tent and approach the desk, as their head just sort of flies through the floor onto their head. They'll then pick up the canvas we finished, and as long as it's up to par, it'll go straight into the shredder. From this angle, we can see that the shredded canvas actually clips through the rollers on the desk and moves out of sight. And after popping through the other side, it'll unload. With the first task done, the papercraft challenge will load in as Sun disappears and Moon is moved into the Loft. As for this particular enemy, they'll appear in a multitude of locations throughout the map, and we'll have to use our flashlight in order to fend them off. One of the places Moon can appear is behind the curtains on the back wall, and we can see that they float upside down just out of sight here, snapping into their arrival animation and swinging down into sight. On the other hand, we can watch as Moon disappears, and in this case, they'll sink down behind the railing, bending forward and crunching down as they clip through the floor. They're then warped to the next position somewhere in the Loft, placed just out of sight, and this will continue for the rest of the night. Finally, before moving on from this chapter, I found an object placed beneath the map that I didn't recognize. They look like 3 plugs or electrical outlets with some wire extending from them, and each one has a 0 floating directly above it. There are also these dashes off to the side, but I'm not entirely sure what their purpose is. That's it for the Arts and Crafts minigame though, so let's head into the next backstage challenge, Salon Staff Makeover. In this game, you'll be tasked with the beautification of several Staffbots. As each of them roll up, the monitor to our right will display a particular style they're looking for. Using various brushes, we'll spruce up their faces using the different colors and patterns of makeup, and then use the accessories from the bust on our left. If we make a mistake, the Staffbot's eyes will turn red, and they'll stand in the back. And if 3 accumulate, we'll be jump scared and forced to restart. As we begin and turn the lights on, we can get a much better look at our cozy little green room. We can see from an overhead shot that this area is connected to a few hallways that are mostly out of the player's sight. The hallway on our left, where the Staffbots go through, extends just outside the player's view and drops off into a giant hole, something we can't typically see from our little makeup station. I then decide to have a look at the multitude of styles these inactive bots are rocking, ranging from mustache circus baby to purple Lord Farquaad. I never realized just how many outfits these bots could appear in, and they fill 2 tiers of the storage area with very few repeats. One of the bots on the top level is wearing what appears to be a magician's outfit. Although this isn't particularly special, there's just something about a swanky top hat and bow tie that I have to respect. As for the hallway on our right that the bots arrive from, we'll find an army of staff bots lined up here in 2 columns. They're all leaning forward with their hands behind their backs, waiting for their turn to be made fabulous. When the first bot enters the room, we can watch them activate and roll through the door to our location. If we make a mistake, the staff bots roll over to the back wall and just gonna point at us with the other hand on their hip. Even with their evil red eyes, it's clear they're not as mad as they are disappointed, which I'm afraid is much worse. Next, I was curious what happens to the bots, who we've given a satisfactory makeover. As you can see here, the moment we hit the button, the cosmetics on the busts to our left will instantly refresh for our next customer. The happy staff bot will enter the side hallway I mentioned earlier and stop in front of the gaping hole in the floor, never stopping their little victory dance. What happened next, however, was definitely unexpected. From another angle, I watched as the second bot left the studio and rolled into the hallway, and the previous bot wasn't moved or unloaded. The second bot then rolled up behind the other, and they continued, celebrating? This is this is definitely not what I expected when I followed these characters over here, and unfortunately, it's something we'll never unsee. I guess what they say is true. The animatronics do get a bit quirky at night. I just didn't think this is what Phone Guy meant. There's no hard mode night for this particular minigame though, so let's continue on to Glam Makeover. This minigame follows a similar goal as the previous, but instead of a Staffbot, we'll be providing a makeover for the indecisive Roxanne Wolf. Using the monitor to our right, we'll once again apply makeup and accessories to Roxanne Wolf. The difference here is that Roxanne will get upset when we're not looking at her, and if she gets too upset, we'll be jump scared and have to start over from the beginning. So of course, I first want to have a look at this unusually dark room with the lights on, and we'll see that beyond our typical range of vision, the rest of the salon is fully modeled. One thing that had me curious was the show stage in the corner of the room, and taking a look beyond the curtain shows that there's nothing currently behind it. The corner of the room is also missing, and we can see straight out of bounds from atop the stage. For the most part, there isn't a whole lot to see within the level itself, so let's put our focus on Roxy for the moment. One thing in particular I was curious about is what happens when Roxy turns away from the player. Each time the player finishes her makeup, she'll turn around momentarily as her face resets back to normal. If we watch from this perspective, as Roxy turns around, the makeup and accessories instantly vanish. This action is typically obscured by her hair, and we can't even see it in the reflection because she looks down, which is pretty clever. If Roxanne loses her patience, or we simply mess up her style, the camera will be warped beneath the floor for her jump scare. As seen here, she basically just grabs our non-existent shoulders and snaps at us, resetting into a T-pose as our view is blocked by static. Back inside the map, I was curious what would happen if we delete the Staffbots carrying each of the accessories. I was surprised to find that each of the items was still in its proper place. Though, that doesn't mean we didn't totally break the minigame. The platform could be spun as usual, but none of the items were moving along with it. But that's not all. The accessories themselves were no longer affected by gravity, and throwing them resulted in them floating wherever we were holding them. This even applies to the ones we put on Roxy's face, and as she moves, the items we put on her will remain static in the same spots we placed them. Who would have guessed that breaking physics would have adverse effects on our task? We can now have a quick look at this minigame's hard mode variant, Roxy Repair. In this version, we're focused less on making Roxanne Wolf look fabulous, and more so less terrifying. The game is mostly the same here, only now Roxy gets agitated easier and can enter this frantic state, only being calmed by the sound of her own voice on the Roxy talkie. When entering this game mode, I wasn't expecting Roxanne to look this horrifying, and it's definitely not helped by the grim lighting that surrounds us. Not only Roxy, but the Staffbots beside us are also pretty terrifying, now taking the appearance of their Nightmarian counterparts. As for the room itself, it's typically too dark to see much, and there's a good reason for that. Turning the lights on, we can see the true extent of how ravaged this once booming salon has become. Most of the room has been completely destroyed, with light fixtures hanging from the ceiling and rubble pretty much everywhere you look. When she begins to freak out, she'll put her hands on her head and look upward, shaking violently, which is not much easier to watch in bullet time. When we're finished applying makeup and accessories, she'll lean forward and shake them off, and rather than disappearing like the previous challenge, they'll actually fly off her face. For the most part, her jump scare animation is the same as before, only now it uses the shattered model we were working with in the challenge. And yes, after her jump scare animation finishes, she will assert dominance on us like we weren't just trying to help her 2 seconds ago. If the player manages to keep Roxanne happy and completes all 3 tasks, the screen will go black for a moment as the rest of the accessories vanish and her mask appears on the nearest Staffbot. As we watch this from a different angle with the lights on, we'll see that the swap takes place immediately while our vision is obstructed. After we put the mask on her face, Roxy will turn back to the player and rest her head in her hands. And because I like having my face intact, I think we'll just give her some space. And with that, that's everything I found hidden behind the scenes in the hub and backstage minigames. There are dozens of minigames left to cover, so we still have a lot to see. Next up is the Fazecade. So as we begin the Fazcade minigames, the first we'll play is Bonk. This game is pretty straightforward. We'll wield our trusty mallets and smack away the onslaught of puppets popping out of the machine. In order to complete each level, you have to reach a certain threshold of points, hitting Bonbon and Bonnet while avoiding Helpy, who will take away points instead. In the following rounds, Plushbabies will begin spawning, and you'll have to hit them 3 times to avoid a jump scare. So restarting this minigame, we can switch the lights on and have a look around this area. Within the map, there are several arcade machines machines that surround you. Although something you'll quickly realize is that this area is a bit grim for a family arcade. This whole place looks a bit gloomy, which would make sense considering this minigame technically takes place in Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. Even worse, we're trapped in here forever. The hallway behind the machine just leads into the void, and the door behind us was only a simulation and never led anywhere at all. So the only way to get out of this is to bonk some bonds. Speaking of which, the player doesn't really exist either. We're only a floating pair of clubs that were trained in the art of destroying bonbons. We also don't obey the laws of time, since one of our clubs moves regularly in bullet time and the other lags behind. With the game started, we can now take a look at how these puppets appear before facing the wrath of our mallets. As you can see, they just kind of pop into view from our usual perspective, but from inside the machine, we can see that they'll appear out of our sight and fly up through the holes. Something I find super creepy is the fact that they'll always focus their head on the player camera. That means by detaching the camera and moving it around, they'll follow it with their heads no matter where it goes, including behind and beneath them. We can also watch in bullet time as we give them a good wallop, and when the mouth connects with Bonbon's head, some metallic debris will appear as they snap into their hit animation. After a moment, they'll duck back down into the hole and unload completely. As I said earlier, if a plush baby appears and you don't hit them in time, they'll actually jump scare you and force you to restart the minigame. As is consistent with these minigames, the jump scare model is stored outside the level in a double-faced sphere, meaning we can't see inside if we're outside, and we can't see outside if we're inside it. I wouldn't say Plush Baby's jump scare is the scariest of them all, but she definitely has the spirit. She even T-poses afterwards. That's gotta count for something. Since we've met our plushie demise, we might as well take a look at the game over screen while we're here. There really isn't much to see other than hanging tubes and wiring from above us, despite not connecting to anything at all. The entire screen itself takes place on a large checkered floor, and the table occupies very little space. It's honestly pretty unnerving. Back inside the minigame, we can get our revenge on Plush Baby, and her animations are similar to the others. She reels back, but she toughs out 2 more hits before leaving. Once again, she just ducks out of sight and unloads, biding her time to come back and annoy us again. As if things weren't hard enough as it is, this minigame has a hard mode version called Bonkabon Bonus Round. When the game starts, you'll immediately realize that the lights aren't coming on. We're playing this one in the dark, but no matter, I'm still getting me mallet. On round 3, a pair of creepy eyes will appear to distract you, eventually leading to the bonus round. A glitch trap puppet can appear now, and if we hit it, the game enters tilt mode, requiring some rewiring before we can continue. With the lights turned on, we'll see that this map is practically identical to the original, although the machine we play on has changed a bit on the inside. What I'm more interested in are the eyes seen on round 3. Up close, we'll find that these guys are just a couple of black spheres with pupils in the center, and they'll basically just hover inside the hole to trick the player. During this bonus round, this little glitch trap puppet will appear as a sort of stage hazard. It's just as creepy as I'd expected with the lights on, but what about the arm holding it up? Taking a look inside the machine, you'll see that the arm isn't attached to anyone or anything. It's just a floating limb inside of an arcade machine. Nothing to see here, folks. When hit by the player, he'll slide down into the hole and unload, though he's actually still visible up above when this takes place. When the tilt mode activates, the main play area flips up to reveal some disconnected wires and a code that we'll need to use to repair the machine. Our trusty clubs will unload during this sequence, only to reappear afterwards as the puppets begin their assault once again. Also, if we take a look inside the machine, the wires and plugs you reattached during this sequence have vanished. When the minigame came to an end, I was a bit surprised to find that I was not where I should be. During this after game screen, I was several yards from the prize machine, and so I couldn't collect my prize or press the buttons on the table. I'm not sure if this is because I messed with the player camera or something else, but it's a huge bummer. But with that said, let's dive into the next minigame, DJ Music Time. In this minigame, we'll be following the footsteps of the master himself, DJ Music Man, to create some straight up bops. After approaching our DJ station, he'll play a song and display some visuals on our setup, and our goal is to recreate that song using the various tools at our disposal. In the advanced mode, we'll also employ the use of a Faz camera to stop the mini music men who appear in the tunnels around the player. Here we have more rounds to complete and less time to manage them, making this task a lot harder than the previous. Of course, if our musical talents fall falls short of his expectations, we'll be jump scared by Music Man. So first and foremost, we can take a closer look at our wise teacher before starting the minigame. And from beyond the black barrier, we can see him lying down peacefully in this giant tunnel. He's a bit too large for this area though, so part of his body sticks out of bounds. He's a lot less terrifying while he's peacefully taking a snooze. But that comfort is unfortunately short-lived. While looking at this monstrous animatronic, I saw a pair of hand feet down the void space below. Hilariously, Music Man is so big, his jump scare model doesn't fully fit inside of his jump scare sphere. And speaking of which, this is what his jump scare animation looks like from another angle, followed by his A pose immediately after. There's additionally a model for the mini Music Man out here, and this is certainly one of the stranger T-poses I've ever seen. And of course, we can watch their scare sequence play out as well. Now as we start the minigame, we'll watch as this gargantuan DJ wakes from his nap and begins crawling out into the studio. I thought it'd be less intimidating watching this from another angle, but no, he is still just as terrifying. Maybe even more so now that we can see how small the room is in comparison. Lucky for us, DJ Music Man loves a good groove, and so we can avoid certain death if we make some sweet jams. We will have no audience today, but we can take a peek inside of these side rooms, where we'll find a couch and some posters, as well as a little Freddy plush. Despite there being a second window above each of these viewing rooms, there is no second floor, meaning they serve no real purpose. Now let's turn our attention to our mixing booth. So during our playthrough, various images will appear on screen to help us reconstruct the chosen song. But this is no ordinary screen. Actually, this isn't a screen at all. The visuals we use to make our sweet mixtape are actually floating within a black compartment, and this dark box extends beyond the back of our audio mixing gear. These various effects are layered a bit strangely, and now everything here is visible from all angles, so it's definitely best to stay in your station. That being said, let's jump into the advanced night and continue our flourishing music career. So during this level, we'll be interrupted during our practice by the obnoxious clatter of the mini Music Men, and the Faz camera is used to scare them off. When they appear, these enemies just blink into existence beyond the walls of the studio and slide through these small purple tubes, clanging their cymbals to announce their presence. If we don't scare them off in time, they'll briefly wind up and then spring into the air, falling on top of you and triggering the jump scare we looked at earlier. Just like the puppets in Bonk, this animatronic follows you with their head as you move around. And so, when the jump scare triggered, they look directly at the wall since we are now outside the map. In this game's hard mode version, the studio has fallen into disrepair, and that includes our gracious host, Music Man as well. The minigame plays out mostly the same here, although it's a lot more difficult with the addition of a new switch on our board. Not only this, but a mini Music Man can appear behind our board and stomp on our controls, making it nearly impossible to complete the challenge. As we restart this minigame, we can take a look at how the map has changed around us. The entire place has badly decayed and is now covered in a layer of rust and grime. What's funny about this is that the side rooms are actually unchanged. They're just as clean and vibrant as ever, and it's only the windows that appear dirty and ruined. During this night, this mischievous mini can appear from behind our station and provide us with an unwanted remix. At first I couldn't figure out where this enemy was appearing from, but eventually I learned that they appear in a T-pose directly behind you, quickly sliding beneath us and through our booth as they begin climbing on top. There are a variety of minis you can encounter on this level, but this one, who lacks any external pieces, is probably the creepiest. Although they're not actively loaded in at the same time, each of these mini Music Men has a jumpscare model stored out of bounds, including this terrifying creature here. Now as for DJ Music Man, he is not in the best shape of his career. His teeth are destroyed, and the left side of his head has been badly damaged, resulting in a pretty terrifying animatronic as his endoskeleton is now visible. Seeing this character is pretty cool though, since to my knowledge, this is the first time we've seen a ruined Music Man. Despite the hardship, he remains dedicated to the sweet vaporwave bangers. That's it for this minigame though, so now it's time to hit the lanes in the next level. Bonnie Bowl. In Bonnie Bowl, we'll be playing a pretty standard 10 frames of bowling, though there are a few hazards in our path. Every couple of frames, a new obstacle will activate with the intention of stopping our perfect game. These can be as simple as a couple of disembodied Monty heads blocking the lane, or even the pin setter slamming its jaws down as it mercilessly approaches you. After all 10 frames are complete, the minigame comes to an end, if you survive, that is. Restarting this minigame, the first thing I did was fly up into the ceiling to take a look at Moon, but he was apparently late getting to work. Only his hat was present, and it stays floating here until he becomes active and peeks down at the player. After loading in, he'll lean forward and stare us down from the hole above until we shine the flashlight on him. He then slinks back out of sight and freezes in place. Because we can be killed by Moon if we don't ward him off, we can also find his jump scare model T-posing out of bounds. While exploring outside the map, I noticed there was a copy of the ball return floating directly beneath the map. Inside of it, there are several bowling balls, and the functionality of this object is is pretty interesting. After rolling the ball and knocking out some pins, the ball isn't unloaded like I expected, but instead, it's warped back into the ball return underneath the map. Then, as the next frame loads in, the bowling balls are taken from out of bounds and teleported into the return inside the level. A pretty neat trick to create the illusion of a functional ball return. By this point, the pin setter started barreling down the lane at me, and though there isn't really anything to see off camera in this specific sequence, it's still terrifying. It makes me super anxious. Forget all this horror business, I'm going back to Wii Sports Bowling. Though the sequence itself is pretty basic, there's a hidden secret within Bonnie's massive head that you can't typically see. Each hole inside the triangular pin holder has a numerical value starting from the front. After the first frame is completed, each of these values resets to a 0, and it never changed back during my playthrough. On the topic of hidden developer text, looking out of bounds next to the pin setter, we'll find 2 instances of the word text floating on top of each other. At first I thought this was left over by accident, and it didn't serve any purpose, but I later found out that the bottom text changed to say turn 1 after I played the first frame. I thought the number would go up as I played more of the game, but all the following frames still said turn 1. Next, there's something super interesting hidden out of bounds that I don't believe ever shows up in game. Hovering out of bounds is a wheel that appears to be hanging from a chain. On it are 4 icons: a green bowling ball, Monty, Moon, and what appears to be a person with a rotation symbol, each representing a different hazard. Typically, we can see which hazard is coming as it appears on the screen up above, but I don't believe this was originally meant to be the case. If we throw the ball while out of bounds, we can see that after 2 frames, this wheel will lower down and switch to one of the 4 pictured obstacles before reeling back up. The Monty Moon options are accurate, but the other 2 don't exactly make sense as far as I can understand them. When the pin setter goes on the attack, the wheel remains unchanged, which leads me to believe this was a functionality that was abandoned at some point in development. Continuing on to the other obstacles, the next I want to take a look at were the Monty heads that pop in through these doors. When this hazard becomes active, the heads will appear just beyond the floor that extends past the map's walls. There is no body attached to these frightening reptilian heads, and their neck is really just the back of their head, stretched really far. What's most funny about these guys is that after retracting out of sight, they'll quickly turn over on their side and lay here until they reactivate. They seem pretty intimidating from afar, but we can warp the player inside their path and remain unharmed, even when their gaping jaws of death fly through us. Another enemy we'll face here is Plushbaby, and she drops down from the vent above. After landing and situating herself, she'll begin running at the player, and you'll have to hit her with a bowling ball to avoid getting jump scared. From another angle, this whole thing is absolutely hilarious. She gets pummeled by the ball and sticks to it while rolling down the lane, blasting away the pins with her face and unloading. Glorious! Finally, I want to try moving the player around the map while bowling to see what would happen. I moved myself directly in front of the pin setter and managed to play mostly unhindered, which resulted in a pretty easy strike. After that, I got comfy on the couch with the animatronic plushies, and when I threw the ball, it sadly hit the side of the lane, resulting in a wasted roll. That's it for our adventures in Bonnie Bowl, so now we'll jump into the last of the Fazecade minigames, Fazerblast. In this classic carnival-style game, you'll wield your trusty Fazerblaster and shoot at the targets passing by. Carnie is watching, so you have to try your best to keep the Dreadbear meter in the green. Otherwise, you're as good as dead. There are 5 levels to this minigame in total, which we'll be covering in the order we play them. Restarting this level, I started by moving the camera around the level, getting a good look at our pal Carnie in the process. He's just standing in this tiny room all to himself, and looking all kinds of sinister in the process. Things get even creepier as we take a look around the level, which is coated in this thick layer of eerie green fog. I saw something floating a great distance from the rest of the level, and upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a ball, just sort of floating out here. Technically, it was multiple. It flickered between yellow and red, an effect caused by these 2 objects fighting to occupy the same space. These balls will be used in the following levels, but not this first one. So it's a bit peculiar finding them here. With the lights on, we can get a much better look at the location this level takes place in, and besides a few trees and some level dressing, it's pretty barren. That being said, let's take a look at the Fazerblast minigame itself. Before even starting the game, we can move the camera beyond the red curtain to find a ton of assets already occupying the interior. To start, the back wall is a constantly looping animation of some stars passing by, which helps sell the illusion of movement during the game. On either side of the stage, we can find various assets stacked and clipping through each other, ranging from the dozen of asteroids, the animatronic cast, and several Lulz Hacks robots floating near the ceiling. That's only the tip of the iceberg too, since below the stage we'll find a ton of star-shaped targets waiting to be activated. While the minigame is being played, these stars will light up and begin rising upwards, passing through the player's sight and freezing once out of view. Some of these objects aren't even stored within the minigame stand itself, and because of this we can find a backdrop backdrop, some planets, and more of our main cast currently occupying the space beyond the minigame and out of our sight. It's better to preload these objects when initially entering the level to avoid a lag spike if they just appeared, and because there are so many of them passing by, it makes more sense to have them already spawned in and ready to be moved. As I said before, Carnie doesn't like when players fail to keep the Dreadbear meter up in the safe zone. Because of this, we can find his jumpscare model floating beneath the level, and he's in a pretty strange pose too. I expected a T-pose, which is typical in these cases, but instead, he's in this strange, you must be this tall to die pose. We can then view his jumpscare in bullet time, which is pretty spooky, and oh, there's a T-pose. Glorious. In the following level, we'll be playing basically the same minigame, although the setting has changed from outer space to the western frontier. We're not only using the Fazerblast this time either, we now have a basket full of what looks like colorful soft balls as well, and we'll use these to hit the large targets that appear during the minigame. To make things even more difficult, a box containing Plushbaby will appear, meaning you'll have to hit her with the Fazerblaster anytime she pops into existence. Once again, we can restart this minigame and flick the lights on for a better look. First, we can look beyond the stage and find a ton of objects waiting to be pulled into the main gameplay area. There are multiple backdrops, targets, and even the chair holding Plushbaby just kinda chilling back here. Inside the wagon, there are a handful of different objects in place as well, waiting for the player to start the minigame so they can begin moving. For the most part, the functionality of this level remains the same as before. The objects stored outside the gameplay area will be moved inside as needed. What I was really curious about is a train that appears to move endlessly throughout the stage midway through the minigame. From behind the scenes, we can watch as the train cars pass through the stage as intended, exiting through the wall where the player can't see them, and then moving back to their starting location. After they reach the other side, they'll slide back through the wall and start this process over again, which is a really clever way of pulling off this effect. Next, when we release the Plushbaby hidden behind this gift box, the level goes dark around us as she vanishes. From another angle, we can see that this is no ordinary darkness, but in reality, it is a large double-faced sphere that encapsulates the player and then fades out as the curtains close. From this point forward, Plushbaby can now appear in a random location somewhere in the play area, meaning you have to shoot her with a Fazerblaster to avoid dying before the challenge is complete. That's really it for the Western level, so let's head into the first of this game's hard mode levels. In total, there are 3 hard mode minigames for Fazerblast, each of them inspired by the first 3 Five Nights at Freddy's games. In the FNAF 1 level, we'll be given a third weapon, the dart gun. And now must use all 3 tools to play through a recreation of the very first FNAF game. In the office, we'll have to stop the animatronics from getting past the doors, as we continue popping balloons and hitting targets. We can even get jump scared within the minigame, which is getting too meta for my taste. When restarting this level, I moved the camera beyond the wagon and found something pretty cool. The office environment is currently occupying this open space, and inside of it, we'll find several balloons and targets hovering below the rest of the assets. Currently, the main stage objects are present behind the curtain, and off to the side we'll find Foxy in his pirate cove clipping through the wall. On the main stage, we'll eventually get the option to shoot a target on each of the 3 animatronics present. After landing a shot on one of them, they'll slide down and behind the foreground so we can't see them anymore, but they'll remain here indefinitely. After this section is over, we can watch as the next set slides into place and the old one moves outside the map. Each of these locations move at the same time while the curtain is closed, making the swap unnoticeable from your usual perspective. Now, with the office loaded into the main play area, we can watch as the animatronics appear at the doors. The second they arrive, the cutout will instantly warp behind one of the office doors and remain there for a moment, allowing the player time to hit the target and close the door. If you don't hit the target in time, a jump scare will take place and block you from getting points for a bit. So the way these scare sequences work is a lot more interesting than you'd think. Directly beneath the play area, we'll find what looks like a flat line stretching across the ground. When a jump scare takes place, this line will quickly move upwards and expand into the giant black screen that covers the gameplay area. And on it will be the animatronic who got to you first. After filling with static, this screen will then turn blank again as it shrinks back into this tiny flat shape. Before moving on to the next level, I tried deleting the curtain before starting the minigame in hopes of watching things play out from your regular perspective. Once the game started though, nothing happened. There were no targets, balloons, or anything else moving on the stage. Plushbaby still spawned, but there was absolutely no way to gain points or move on to the next stages, effectively soft-locking my game. Giving this area one more reset, I deleted the whole cart this time instead of the curtains, and surprisingly, the minigame played completely unhindered. It's actually easier playing this way, since there isn't anything to obstruct the balloons as they float up and out to the play area. area. We can also watch as the other areas move into the level, which is pretty cool. Also, right above Dreadbear is a pair of floating marionette arms. These aren't activated during gameplay just yet, so let's jump into the next hard mode level where they do make an appearance. In the FNAF 2 minigame, all 3 cards will become active as you attempt to get as many points as possible. To do this, you'll check the cameras using your Fazerblast as you keep an eye out for animatronics, shooting these balloon monstrosities with your dart gun as they appear in the vents beside you. During this level, the puppet hands I mentioned earlier keep the Dreadbear meter at or below half, which means you'll have very little room for mistakes. At the end of this level, a fire breaks out and begins burning everything to the ground, including Carnie. Jumping back in time, I started to explore the area to see what I could find, immediately stumbling across a Balloon Bonnie and who I think is Balloon Boy. I'm not positive that's who this is supposed to be, but it's the best guess I can muster. It turns out these characters are stored behind these side cards and within the vents until they're moved into the player's sight. As you can see, this vent has Toy Bonnie, Mangle, the Cupcake, and a cutout Toy Chica, all crammed inside. There are also multiple copies of the children who appear in the side areas. There are some currently laying flat waiting to activate, and others that are stored upright beneath the wagon. They'll pop up occasionally as a way of earning points, but for now they remain dormant and out of sight. In the center play area, we'll find a bunch of different assets stored here and waiting to be used. The player's desk, the office walls, and the back hallway area are all different layers placed in front of each other. Off to the side, we can find withered Foxy and the puppet hanging out back here as well, but not much else. Mangle appeared in the vent on the right shortly after the game started, and we can watch in slow motion as the darts make easy work of them. Glitter and balloon pieces rain down as Mangle's various pieces explode into a rain of plastic and defeat. It's only a carnival game, but yes, it is that serious. Similar to the previous minigames, we can find several screens that appear within this hard mode level stored out of bounds. The prize corner and camera interface are placed directly outside the play area on the left, and next to this is an image of the Give Cake minigame from FNAF 2. It's placed just behind the cards on the left side, and there's some more children's sprites out here as well. At the end of the level, the entire area becomes engulfed in flames, including our friend Carnie. This fire starts off super small and grows in size as more fades in over time, eventually overtaking most of this location as the game comes to an end. We can now head into the final Fazerblast minigame, the FNAF 3 hard mode level. This level is by far the shortest and most simple. All you have to do is fend off Plushbaby as you use all 3 tools to slowly disassemble Springtrap. The entire level is burnt to a crisp, and the obstacles make it hard to effectively attack our enemy. After finishing him off, he'll jump scare you, and Glitchtrap's hand appears in the ball basket to hand us some victory cake. With the lights on, we can see the carnage this fire wrought upon this area a lot better. The wagons are completely destroyed and unrecognizable, and not much better can be said about Carnie. He's been roasted like a passive-aggressive marshmallow, and I'd feel bad if you weren't heckling us this entire time. Our horrifying adversary Springtrap is also loaded in as soon as we start the minigame. He's just chilling behind Carnie at the moment, and somehow he's almost scarier as a static cutout. From another view, we can watch as he teleports around this level, instantly warping between locations as we attempt to break him apart. I'm not sure if this destroyed version is more or less creepy than the fully intact one, but either way, they're getting Fazerblasted. After landing the final hit, Springtrap will warp in front of the player as the jump scare plays out, falling backwards onto the floor as Glitchtrap's hand extends from our basket. If we trace the arm back to its origin, we'll find that it simply comes to an end inside the basket, and it's of course not attached to anything inside. After taking the cake, which is originally a plushie during your first playthrough, his hand will then retract back into the ball bucket and clip through the table. Once it's under the table and out of sight, it will unload completely. And with that, that's everything I found hidden behind the scenes and off camera in Help Wanted 2's Fazecade minigames. I hope you're all ready for some fast food action. So as we head into the food prep minigames, the first restaurant in need of our expert services is El Chips. In this game, you'll work behind the counter to feed a barrage of starving Staffbots, microwaving a variety of food items and scooping sides to fill out the orders appearing on the big screen. There's more than a bad Yelp review on the line here, since failing to complete the orders in time results in a jump scare. Rewinding time, the very first thing I wanted to do was take a look at the food court area to see what a workplace really looked like. The lobby area we're working out 9 to 5 in is only only a small section of the greater map we're currently in, and around the corner are a couple of interesting finds. For one, the checkered flooring comes to a stop just before this large hallway on our left, and the hallways extend a short ways beyond that as well. On this side of the court, we can also find a small army of hungry Staffbots waiting for their turn to grab a quick bite, each of them holding a food tray and remaining idle until the dinner bell rings. We can watch as this takes place from a different perspective, and they'll simply roll their way up to the counter and queue up for their turn. After we've satisfied their orders, the bots will turn around and wheel the way back to the others, vanishing once they've left the player's sight, but their food items remain momentarily. That means the food on their trays just falls to the floor, and there's no point in serving them at all, rendering our job completely pointless. Perfect. I love it. On the topic of Staffbots, there are a couple of them behind the player working in the kitchen, but they're miles away from that Michelin star. As a matter of fact, they haven't even started. The first bot is standing in front of the two pots, stirring away at a whole lot of nothing. There's steam coming from them both, despite there being nothing inside. But hey, at least this meal is low on calories. On the other side, there's another bot working with a couple of frying pans, and while he's made an equal amount of nothing, he definitely gets an A+ for the style points. He straight up hits the Salt Bay pose as he cooks, sometimes even lighting the pan on fire in the process. All these theatrics, and they've made zero food. Glorious. Now, one of the more interesting parts of this minigame has to be the seating area outside the food court. Most of this area is beyond the player's typical viewpoint, but out here we can find various seats and other assets occupying this open space. What I mainly wanted to highlight though is this giant projection that's placed beyond the balcony. This is a really giant image of the Pizzaplex that's dynamically linked to the camera, and as we move the camera around this object, we can see more of the surrounding area, including the balcony that this area is meant to replicate. By doing it this way, you would never know we're not actually in the Pizzaplex, and your machine doesn't have to load in a fully modeled location you'll never get to explore. If we take a look beneath the map, there are a couple of interesting things hidden out here in the void. First, there's a copy of the screen we use to take the Staffbot's orders down here, and I'm not exactly certain of its purpose. Not far from here we'll also find the head Chefbot's jumpscare model T-posing in the abyss. This model is a lot taller than I expected them to be, and we can watch their jumpscare from another angle while we're down here. On the topic of this particular enemy, we could find them elsewhere in the map as well, just not somewhere you may expect. Above the order screen and out of bounds, we'll find the head Chefbot hanging upside down in their default pose. When playing the tutorial for this level, this character drops down from up above to give you a quick rundown. But because we've skipped the tutorial, they'll just hang out here temporarily and then unload. Before we move on, I wanted to know where the food comes from when we press the buttons in our station. After the button is pressed, the food we choose will instantly appear inside the machine where we can then grab it. This is definitely the quickest fast food I've ever seen, but unfortunately, still microwave quality. Now as you press on, we'll arrive at Pizza Pizza Pizza, because one less pizza is copyright infringement for an actual restaurant chain. This minigame is extremely similar to the previous, although this time we're rocking the Pizzatron 3000. We'll once again view the orders on the big screen up above, only now we're making actual pizzas instead. Staffbots will arrive at the counter, but our only real customer is an impatient Glamrock Chica, who rudely shoves the bots out of the way each time we finish an order. You'll do this for multiple meal rushes, clearing the night if you can complete each order in time. With the lights on, we can have a peek around the level, where we'll find that our Staffbot friend is hanging out just out of sight. I say friend because, unlike the previous minigame, there's only one bot occupying this level at the moment. There can be multiple bots waiting at the counter at the same time, but they aren't all loaded in at once before entering the gameplay area. Directly below this area, we'll find a T-posing Glamrock Chica floating dormant out of bounds. Despite her presently chilling in the void, I moved the camera back inside the map to find her going wild on the garbage in front of our workplace. Well, sort of anyways. She's standing behind the trash cans, and it looks like she's shoveling garbage into her mouth, but up close we can see that she's eating nothing at all. Her hands are completely empty. This is one of the many locations she can appear in throughout the minigame, and after the player looks at her, she'll leave, warping somewhere else to bother you until you look at her again. When the player finishes an order and serves it up, Chica appears to steal a poor Staffbot's lunch. But what does this look like from another angle? As soon as the bell is rung, Chica is moved behind the counter and out of our sight, starting in this super scrunched up pose before rising upward into view. Throwing the bots out of her way, she'll then scarf down all the food we just prepared. And by that I mean she knocks the tray over and wastes all our efforts. Something interesting I noticed when viewing this in bullet time is that the square particles seen during this eating sequence have a default texture applied to them. These are a bit too dark to see during regular gameplay, but here we can clearly see their checkered appearance. This is also obscured a bit by her hands, since she blocks most of the tray during this eating animation. The poor Staffbot Chica just obliterated will lay on the ground for the duration portion of this sequence, eventually unloading before their attacker does the same. A few seconds later, another bot will appear in their starting location, carrying a tray over to the player in hopes of getting something good to eat. Now, because this area functions mostly the same as the last minigame, there isn't much else to see here, but we can take a quick look at Glamrock Chica's jumpscare animation in bullet time, which is pretty frightening, but hard to take seriously with food particles flying out of her mouth. She then resets to a T-pose as static fills the player's screen. Heading into Food Prep's one and only hard mode minigame, we'll arrive at the Fazbear Theater. We'll once again be feeding Glamrock Chica here, only now we're serving various movie theater snacks instead. On top of distributing pretzels and overpriced popcorn, we'll also have to mix the drinks from the drink fountain to create specific combinations. We're equipped with a fast camera as well, not for the chicken, but the endoskeletons approaching from the darkness. They'll move closer when they're not being watched, and failing to flash them in time will result in a jump scare. Restarting this night, we can flick the lights on in this theater area, where you'll notice a couple of things. For one, even if we want to leave, there is truly no escape from our pizza overlords. The doorway on our left is a giant gray barrier, and there are piles of trash leading outwards into the void beyond it. The door on our right doesn't lead anywhere either, so we're pretty much trapped here until our shift is over. Behind the player there are two doorways, but the room they lead to is only a small hallway with, you guessed it, more garbage. Like the last minigame, if we look underneath the floor, there is a T-posing shattered Glamrock Chica below the map, and right next to her is a huge white platform. This platform is a 3D object that is a solid white color, and I'm not entirely sure why this object is down here. It could be a piece of leftover white boxing, but that's only a hunch. Now, during our shift, our good pal Chica can appear in various locations to distract you from the task at hand. When this takes place, we can see from another angle that she instantly warps between these poses, including this one, where she stares longingly at the popcorn machine. When the player turns to face her, she'll quickly leave your sight. And from another angle, this looks a bit funny. As this animation begins, she'll quickly sink down behind the counter as her knees clip to the floor, her torso moving downwards until she's completely out of our view. She'll then be removed from the map until she's set to appear again. Unlike the other minigames, when we finish an order in the theater, Glamrock Chica will slam the tray and the food falls out of sight. This is pretty hilarious when watched from another perspective, as you'll see that the moment we ring the bell, Chica will warp in front of the counter, doing the craziest splits you will ever see. She's so talented, in fact, that she has completely dislocated both her arms. They're nowhere near their sockets as she slams her fists down on the tray. The same food particles used earlier start flying out from behind her head, and a moment later, she snaps into this hunched over pose, rising up into the player's sights as this sequence ends. Chica isn't the only animatronic we'll face here, as a couple of Endos will make an appearance a bit later in the minigame. With the lights on, we can watch them in all their glory, spawning near the back wall in front of the player and making their way forward each time the player looks away. It's creepy watching them from this view as we break their sight line, since their eyes begin glowing the instant their walking animation activates. If you fail to flash them with a fast camera in time, they'll approach the counter where you're working and raise their hand, swinging forward as the jumpscare animation begins. They also clip to the counter a bit, which I hadn't realized when playing through this game normally. Beneath the map, we can watch their jumpscare animation from another angle and in bullet time, but there's something else down here that you may find a bit funny. Chica's jumpscare model is currently in the split pose from her eating animation, which I really wasn't expecting when I moved the camera over here. That's it for the Fazbear Theater though, which concludes the food prep minigames, so we can now head into the ticket booth levels, where we'll first arrive at the Carousel. In this minigame, you'll be tasked with repairing a broken down merry-go-round using various tools and mechanical pieces. Each time a section of the carousel is repaired, one of the rings surround the player will begin to move, with a mischievous moon catching a free ride. As we continue to work on repairing this eerie carnival ride, we'll also have to shine our flashlight on the lunar bozo each time he appears. If we ignore him for too long, he'll advance another stage, eventually reaching the player and jump scaring you. At the end of the minigame, you'll have to survive a full minute of Moon's attacks. Now, restarting this minigame, we can turn the lights on and zoom out for a better look at this location. The carousel is a brightly colored ride floating in a dark void, and the contrast it creates to the grim red skyline is hard to ignore. The area surrounding the ride is occupied by a handful of structures that can be seen from the player's view. But even with the lights on, we can't see them all too well. The reason for this is because they're textured completely black, and they only exist to create a silhouette in front of the red skies. There's a barn, some trees, and even what looks like a water tower out here. Inside the merry-go-round, we can have a quick look at the characters surrounding the player, and they're all a bit derpy in appearance. Bonnie looks semi-normal compared to the rest, but it doesn't make him any less strange. Chica didn't get the same treatment as the others, and her appearance is far from the nightmarish chicken we're used to seeing. Of all these these characters, the cupcake looks the most like their actual counterpart. But the same can't be said for a Balloon Boy. They really did my man dirty on this one, but it's still too funny not to appreciate. Of course, we can't overlook the main obstacle of this night, which is our good pal Moon. Beneath a two-faced plane, we'll find this creepy fellow hanging out in the void space, and no matter where the camera is moved, he will always face it with his head. This character will remain outside the map until the player starts their work on the ride, and as they do, Moon will instantly warp into the carousel. Here you can see Moon clinging to Bunny's side, and as we shine the flashlight on them, they'll begin to react, eventually collapsing out the player's sight and breaking all their bones as they do. They can either warp to another character and pop out into view, or they'll be sent back to their idle location out of bounds. When leaving the carousel, Moon will reset back to their original idle pose before being thrown back into the ride to continue their attack. Each of the locations Moon can appear in has a different set of animations depending on which character he's riding, and in Balloon Boy's case, will actually condense into a ball after being flashed with their light, clipping halfway into the balloons before being moved. In a similar case, when he's hiding behind the cupcake, he'll actually just lean back like he's sitting down, with his feet fully clipping through the ride. Moon's animations when advancing toward the player are mostly the same. He'll duck out of view, where he can then be warped without the player seeing this take place, growing closer one ring at a time before eventually reaching the player and triggering a jump scare. Speaking of which, if we move the camera beneath the map, we'll find Moon's jump scare model chilling in a double-sided sphere. But this model isn't in a T-pose like usual. Instead, this model is frozen in the last frame of its jump scare, which we can also watch from another angle while we're down here. At the end of this minigame, fire will eventually overrun the ride we're operating before the game ends. Flying over to this barn that's in shambles, we can now see that the fire ignites way outside the map in this rickety barn before growing into the blaze that surrounds us. The flames used in this minigame are interesting too, because they're only flat, looping animations that duplicate in the direction of the carousel. It'd be hard to tell though, since they're programmed to always face the player's camera. That being said, let's take a look at this game's hard mode variant, and here we'll find ourselves in the same old carousel, just a little crispier. In general, this minigame still plays out mostly the same, although the steps to repair the ride are a bit more convoluted now. On top of this, Moon will be replaced by Jack-a-Moon, who is a bit harder to fend off than his non-hard mode variant. We'll still have to survive a full minute against Jack-a-Moon at the end, but the place is already on fire, so there's not much worse he can do anyway. With the lights on, we can now see a lot more clearly just how badly this carnival ride has been damaged. All the characters present are now badly burnt, and in the cupcake's case, even melted. I probably don't need to say it, but this seriously makes the attraction all the more creepy. On top of this, the map around you is now constantly on fire. From this perspective, we can see that all the flames seen outside this ride are actually floating slightly beneath it. Just as you'd probably expect, we can find the Jack-a-Moon model stored outside the map just the same as before. And here, we can get a really good look at this enemy. The functionality of this enemy is mostly the same too. They'll jump from place to place as they grow closer to the player, warping between spaces as usual. Unlike the previous night though, if Jack-a-Moon reaches the player, you'll have one final chance to chase him off with your flashlight before getting jump scared. During this time, we can watch as they appear behind the pillar in the center of the ride, inching out into sight and staring at you from above. While I was here though, I figured it was time to break things a bit. In this case, I teleported myself to the other side of this pillar in the center of the ride, and surprisingly, I was able to pick up the soldering gun and even use it on these old circuit boards. I was not able to mess with the knobs on the other side though, and so even if I went back and forth to grab the needed tools, I couldn't beat the minigame early. Before moving on, we can take a quick look at Jack-a-Moon's jump scare in slow-mo, although for obvious reasons, it's not much different from the other version's jump scare. That's it for the carousel though, so now let's take a look behind the scenes of Captain Foxy's log ride. If you played the Curse of Dreadbear DLC from the first Help Wanted, you'll probably recognize this minigame to some extent. In this minigame, you'll be equipped with a Western-style blaster, and as you ride through a multitude of interesting scenes, targets must be shot at to accumulate points. You have limited time to complete each of these sections, and there are even hidden paths you can unlock by shooting the Helpy cutouts throughout the level. In these areas where it appears we've escaped the Matrix, Jack-a-Moon will appear and try to jump scare you. Targets must be hit in order to block his attacks, and after finishing the ride, your points will be tallied, either clearing the night or falling below the threshold and getting jump scared. Recap aside, let's jump back to the start and take a look at this minigame from another perspective. We'll start the ride in this room where Captain Foxy is standing, and after a brief dialogue, we pass through these giant wooden doors. This section of the ride is actually a small, disconnected segment, and it doesn't directly lead anywhere. This is consistent with the rest of the level too, and by zooming out, you can see that each area we score points in is blown apart, like an unfinished unfinished puzzle. Of course, we have to get around this level somehow, and the way this is pulled off is pretty interesting. As our cart heads down this hill, you'll see from this angle that a black box will envelop the player completely during this transition. Our sweet ride then warps out of this tunnel, appearing in the following section of the level directly beside it. This remains consistent throughout the entire minigame, with the player warping every time we pass through a segment of the ride. This isn't the only time a barrier obstructs our view either, since the lights go out each time we complete a portion of the level or pass around certain corners. During this time, the barrier doesn't just fade in and out like before, but instead your screen will be completely blocked as a gigantic barrier shrinks around you. This thing is seriously massive, but because it's solid black in appearance, we can only see it when it blocks our view of the map. Now, as I mentioned before, the standard path we navigate is only a part of the greater map here, and these hidden pathways can be accessed by hitting the Helpy cutouts within the level. As you can see here, Jackamoon will make an appearance when we enter these locations, and his first appearance takes place in this hallway where he's hiding on top of the archway. When we pass through this small village area, we can move the camera to find Jackamoon floating behind these flat cutouts. As the player shoots the targets and passes by, he'll simply unload, reappearing in another location further ahead. This happens a few times in this area, and he can appear in different poses depending on which window he's occupying. In the following secret area, Jackamoon will appear in a room behind these giant saw blades, and he walks out of a tiny room after the giant door opens. Up close, we can see that the area he spawns in is just a tiny gray room with some AR particle effects floating in front of it. When the player gets close, the door will open up as Jackamoon appears inside, walking out towards you as they pass through this AR world-inspired room. The door will close after you shoot the target, but this enemy does not stop immediately. They'll actually reach the door before realizing they've been bamboozled and then unload out of sheer spite. Up ahead, we'll come to another set of doors, and on either side of us are two more doorways that Jackamoon can attack from. Both doors will open individually at first, allowing the player to shoot the targets as our enemy approaches from inside. After this, both doors will open at the same time, but Jackamoon can only appear on one side. On the right side, we'll watch as the spooky daycare attendant spawns in just kind of floating in midair. When he leaves the room, he does not walk, but instead swims through the air majestically. Once the swimming animation reaches the door, he'll unload like we saw earlier, and the door on the opposite side will open. The animation here is mostly the same, although I realized at this point that I could fire my hand cannon at a regular speed despite the game being in bullet time. That means I was able to fire dozens of them before any of them unloaded. So the room was full of these neon pink spheres. As we continue forward, Jackamoon will make another appearance at the end of this long hallway, dropping from the ceiling and dancing in front of these gravestones as we slowly approach him. If we turn the light on in time, he'll be blinded, flying up through a vent and out of our sight. From another angle, we can watch this animation taking place, and as soon as the light is turned on, Jackamoon will immediately cover his eyes. After a moment, he'll lean forward, quickly flying straight up and into the vent above as he unloads. It almost looks like something quickly grabbed him and dragged him out of the map, which is both funny and terrifying. If you've managed to get through all these locations without scoring enough points, you'll face the wrath of Captain Foxy once the ride has finished. Of course, we can watch this jump scare in bullet time, and I can confidently say my timbers are shivered. That being said, I had an idea on how to break this minigame, and it went about as well as you'd expect. I warped the player away from our usual mode of transport, but even though we're outside the ride, the player will still move along the same designated path. Because of this, I clipped straight through a wall and outside the map, where I could see the ride still moving along on the track. Because I wasn't inside the map, my ammunition was just bouncing off the walls, so I couldn't hit any of the targets. I passed through the walls way more than I expected, popping in and out of the map on several occasions, but never in a position where I could score some points. What's cool is that from this perspective, you can see a lot of stuff happening out of bounds that usually goes unseen, like how the map loads and unloads around you while moving through the level. As cool as this is, it's super disorienting swinging around out here, and I'd much prefer to be inside the map instead. But with that, that's everything I found hidden behind the scenes in the food prep and ticket booth minigames. Next up, we're heading over to the staff area. So the first of the staff-only minigames is Cold Storage. In this surprisingly quick game, you'll thaw out Freddy's arms as their frozen salad. After this, you'll open his arms by matching the tool shapes to their slots, replacing the battery, and managing its temperature to prevent it from overheating. From here, you open up Freddy's face by taking his eyes out, which lets you access the cake hatch in his body. If you can keep this set of coils from overheating, you'll retrieve the cake and replace it with another one, avoiding a total meltdown and finishing the game. Now, starting this minigame over, the first first thing I wanted to do was have a look around the area for a better view of the map. As the name insists, we're actually in a cold storage room lined with shelving and boxes. There are 2 doors in this room that we, for obvious reasons, can't ever investigate more closely. The one behind us immediately drops off into the void below, but the one behind Freddy doesn't. Behind this door, the floor actually extends a short distance past the rest of the room, and the same goes for these orange barriers attached to it. Back inside the map, we can begin thawing out our big friend here, and there's something I noticed that I want to look at more closely. From what I can tell, the ice on Freddy's arms doesn't ever actually change when it's being melted, but instead a neat trick is being used to simulate this taking place. Instead of fully animating a melting sequence, it appears that the ice chunks are actually just shrinking in size at a uniform scale, and as this occurs, they become more transparent until they disappear completely. Even in bullet time, and zoomed in pretty close, this sequence is still pretty convincing. During this process, the majority of the ice block clips through Freddy's arm, only making it more convincing that it's really melting away. Now if we take a look outside the map, we'll find Glamrock Freddy's jumpscare model hanging out in this two-faced sphere. But there's something clearly missing here. For some odd reason, Freddy's eyes are currently pulled out of their sockets and are instead floating behind his back. He's totally alone in this room besides the player, so I'm glad there's somebody watching his back, even if it is himself. Sorry, he set me up for that one. I just couldn't help myself. That's not the only thing that's weird about this jumpscare model either. When watching in bullet time, something I noticed is that the flap on his left arm had opened up to reveal the battery slot inside. There is no battery in it, and his eyes are still missing to top it all off. This is actually inconsistent with the level up above, since we never even melted the ice from Freddy's arms, and his eyes are clearly still inside of his face. Who knows, maybe we kept him waiting too long, and he started the job on his own. With that said, let's move onward to First Aid Pigpatch. Starting on the first level, you'll find that Helpy here is pretty accident prone, and so you're tasked with the exciting job of performing surgical procedures depending on the symptoms he's facing. This can be as simple as cleaning a scraped knee and slapping a bandage on it, or even more complex surgeries like hitting him with a hammer. This can result in Helpy vocalizing his discomfort, which can attract unwanted visitors like our friend Pigpatch here. You'll have to silence Helpy when this happens by using a special mask. Otherwise, you'll ultimately be jump scared. After all your patients have been patched up, the night will be completed, and you can move on to the next. So heading back to the start of this night, we can pull the camera back and take a look at this location. There are actually 2 different sections to this level, despite gameplay only ever taking place inside the surgery room. From our usual perspective, we can see what looks like a hallway or another room of some kind beyond the curtains. This hypothetical room was a total lie though, and it's only a back wall with a false ceiling above it. The floor is covered in a black and white checkered pattern, and it's a bit strange because this floor extends beneath our usual gameplay area too. We just can't see it due to a second floor being placed over top of it. Inside the level, there are a handful of objects and assets scattered around us, including these freaky kid drawings. They're creepy from afar, and not much better up close either. Baby looks especially nightmare-inducing, and the drawings of Helpy in various tragic situations doesn't really help the fact. It's certainly not something I'd want to see during a routine checkup, but hey, at least you get a candy at the end. Speaking of Helpy though, we can find him hanging out behind the scenes before the minigame begins. As a matter of fact, we'll find all 3 of him. All 3 versions of this animatronic are currently placed out of bounds next to the vents, and is actually looking in good shape. It's kind of interesting knowing this though, because we know now the Helpy isn't even injured until he enters our care. The poor guy doesn't realize it, but he'd be perfectly healthy if he just stayed outside instead. Next to this set of characters, there's some stuff I found that I didn't immediately recognize. A couple of small objects that are currently floating out of bounds. The game is paused at the moment, but if we resume time, they will endlessly fall and reset to their starting positions. I don't recognize the black object here, but the rusty looking item turned out to be one of Helpy's lungs. A piece that I don't believe we'll interact with until much later in this game's hard mode level. It's just floating out here in an endless time loop. What even? When the game begins, one of these Helpies will be properly banged up and warped onto the operating table in front of the player. After the surgery is finished though, Helpy won't be moved back out of bounds as I first thought, but instead he's removed from the level entirely. Good for him too. This is probably the worst hospital I've ever seen. Now there's more to this minigame than honing our inner Dr. Traeger, and I'm of course referring to our encounters with Pigpatch. This guy's currently hanging out beneath our feet, T-posing in the void space outside the map. Pigpatch will only attack when drawn to our location by Helpy's shrieks, and he climbs through these vents beside us to do so. The vents of course don't lead anywhere, they just cut off outside the player's view, but there's something weird about this one. The vent is supposed to curve off to the side, but instead there's a solid wall here which should should hypothetically prevent anything from getting through. Well, don't go counting your bacon before it fries, because Pigpatch obviously just doesn't care. He'll turn around this corner and start clipping through it anyway. We can even see this from our usual perspective too, which almost makes it scarier. Pigpatch does as he pleases, and I am not going to be the one to question him. Before moving on from this level, we can take a quick look at his jump scare in bullet time, where he goes ham on the player, pun completely intended. In the following minigame, First Aid Lefty, we'll play essentially the same minigame, but instead of Pigpatch, we'll be dealing with Lefty instead. The difficulty is also raised here, since the vents are now open from the start, so there's a higher chance of encountering Lefty. Also, the TV can switch on automatically, which can attract him too, so you'll have to quickly grab the remote and turn it off to avoid him. So one of the first things I noticed while taking a look at this area is the absence of Helpy's robotic lung out of bounds. Of course, the character himself is still present in the same place as the previous level, but there are no animatronic pieces following an endless time loop. Of course, because we have a new enemy to face in this stage, Lefty has replaced Pigpatch beneath the level. He's T-posing directly beneath our feet and waiting for his favorite commercials to come on TV. Just the same as before, Lefty will enter the vents and begin his attack on the player whenever the sound is triggered inside. And in case you are curious, this is what his jump scare looks like in super slow-mo. Something else you may have noticed is that the vents now obey the laws of physics. Both vents are now properly modeled inside, and there are no walls blocking our view of their interior. That also means that Lefty doesn't have to Mario 64 his way through the wall in order to enter the room, for better or worse. There are a couple of other changes to the map we can note as well, primarily the eroded appearance of the walls and the complete lack of vent covers during this night. Something I had not noticed during my first playthrough was this creepy dark puddle at the player's feet. The shimmer almost makes it look like oil, and I really hope that's all this is. It has a rippling appearance to it as well, almost like something just dropped through it. For the most part, this night is the same as the first, but new injuries can afflict poor Helpy. In this case, he needs a dose of rabid animal cure, but the way they pulled off the foaming effect is pretty neat. Up close, you can see that each section is a small piece of foam that extends and contracts at different intervals. The effect it creates is pretty convincing, but since we're currently watching in slow motion, it almost looks like teeth appearing and disappearing, which is pretty terrifying. There is not much else that changed between these two nights, so let's take a quick peek at the hard mode level as well. First Aid Scrap Baby. Being a hard mode level, this is of course the most difficult of the First Aid minigames. Scrap Baby is faster than the previous animatronics, and the advertisements that appear on our television are much more frequent, so you really have to stay on your toes now. There are also more ailments that can afflict Helpy, like replacing a seriously broken eye or giving him a new lung like we saw out of bounds earlier. So with the lights on, you can more clearly see how much more damage has been done to the office. There are several more of these markings on the wall now, and although it's hard to tell exactly what they are, they make the room all the creepier. The lighting will become more grim during this night as well, but you can't really see that at the moment, so you'll just have to take my word for it. Beneath the player, there is a genuine nightmare waiting for us, and that is Scrap Baby T-posing in all her rusty glory. Up close, she is seriously terrifying, and it's no easier to look at when she's crawling through the vents and into our workplace. Based on her appearance alone, she's the definition of nightmare fuel, and with a giant pair of chainsaw scissors on her right arm, it somehow elevates that factor even more. I don't think a puny hammer will be enough to defend myself either, so I'm thinking that 2-week notice might be a bit overdue. Something I realized during this minigame is that the vents aren't the only place enemies can enter the room from, and Scrap Baby appeared behind the curtain to attack us instead. Apparently, this can also take place in the previous nights as well, but for some reason, it only occurred during my face-off with Scrap Baby. Anyway, she starts this animation in the false room behind the curtains, where she's out of our sight, grabbing the curtain and peering inside at you for a bit before proceeding. She snips her pinchy thing at us a couple of times before entering the room and triggering a jump scare, which we can now check out in slow motion. This sequence is surprisingly brutal. After grabbing the player with a rusty hand, she'll reel back, swinging her weapon forward and giving you the worst haircut you've probably ever gotten. That's it for the First Aid minigames, so let's keep things rolling and dive into Fizzy Faz. Here you'll be tasked with the preparation of Fazbear Entertainment's sugary beverages. Using the provided cup, Fizzy Faz sodas have to be made using the correct ingredients from the dispensers on your left. Each recipe has a time limit to complete, and failing this means trashing your current concoction and starting over on the next. On night 2, the minigame becomes a bit harder, now requiring more ingredients per drink and the introduction of the security cameras. Apparently Staffbots are entitled to breaks too, so you'll have to check their workstations frequently and give them temporary downtime when they become their Nightmarian versions. If you wait too long, they'll arrive at your office, forcing you to shut the whole operation down before they dare ask for a raise. Restarting this minigame, we'll turn the lights on and begin our exploration of this huge factory area. Our office is pretty small in comparison to the rest of the level, and outside this room, we'll find catwalks that lead through various tanks and workstations. When we look at our cameras, this is supposedly the area we're viewing, but there aren't any Staffbots hanging out around here. I'll explain why in just a second, but first, there's a room in the back of this warehouse that I found pretty interesting. We can never get remotely close to this part of the level, but despite this, there's still a large office room here that's completely empty inside. You can actually access this area in Security Breach, and this room is typically full of office furniture and supplies. It's empty now because there is no way for us to access it, and furnishing it would have been practically pointless. So as I said a moment ago, the area outside of our office is just for show, and nothing really takes place inside of it. Behind the scenes, there are 6 rooms lined up in 2 rows, and each of them contains a set of tanks and a working Staffbot. The minigame hasn't started yet, so each bot is currently in sleep mode, waiting for the shift to begin so they can get cracking on those tasty sodas. There is an outlier here though, that being this room is full of trash. We won't be interacting with this room on the first couple of nights, so we'll come back to it a little later on. Occasionally during our work hours, a hard-headed Staffbot will glide past our office holding a tablet and glancing our way. If we take a look beneath the gameplay area, we can find both of these objects placed out of bounds, and they remain here until the bot crosses through our line of sight. There's something a bit odd here as well. Even further below these assets, we can find a small flat square clipping through the lowest point of the map's floor. It's angled slightly and covered in a default texture. While playing through the minigame, it didn't seem to move at any point either, so I'm assuming it's a scrapped asset that was simply forgotten about. Back inside the level, the Staffbot will instantly appear to the left of our player's window and cross through the pathway. When this occurs, the hat and tablet are moved into their possession, but when leaving the player's sight, these objects return to their place out of bounds. I said this happens out of sight, but that's actually not the case. You can see this bot disappearing after passing the door on our right, and you don't even need the free range of motion VR provides to see this. Back inside the office, it's time to start mixing some sodas. To do this, we'll need to employ the use of this fancy cup on our workstation, and after filling it with each ingredient, it'll be sent using this pneumatic tube. This machine works a lot faster than you'd think too, and taking a look inside, you'll see that the ingredients just vanish. The cup never even moves an inch, and the door just opens back up after a moment. None of this would have mattered anyway, since the tube just pokes through the ceiling and stops, and it's solid on the end, so our ingredients couldn't go anywhere regardless. Unless this is some kind of Bluetooth soda dispenser, I'm starting to doubt the work efficiency of this warehouse. Now in Night 2, there are a couple of things that can take place that didn't before. For starters, if the bots go long enough without being given a mandatory break, they'll just sort of stare up at the camera after turning into their Nightmarian form. Moving the camera into the small warehouse maps out of bounds, we can see this for ourselves, as they just stand completely still and glare at the camera. Of course, there isn't a physical camera in the map, so they're really just staring at the corner of the ceiling. When we put them to sleep, they'll instantly shift back to their regular form and stare at the floor. If you wait too long, a Staffbot will appear on the catwalk in front of your office and stare into the room at you. They're clearly not happy about their work schedule, and so they'll slam their hands on the window before just storming into your office to confront you. When this happens, a jump scare is triggered, which you can see here in super slow motion. While this is taking place, we can look inside the map to find that the bot just kept strolling past us. They eventually reached the printers behind us before finally unloading, but it's still funny to see that they never stop moving. Even funnier, this whole sequence restarts while the player is waiting in the static screen after dying. The bot tries to access the office a second time, as if jump scaring you once wasn't enough. So the majority of Fizzy Faz's levels are actually the hard mode variants. There are only 2 regular levels and 3 hard mode ones. On Night 3, the game becomes slightly harder, with more ingredients being needed and a button becoming available to speed up your Staffbots. Be careful though, because this leads to more frequent breaks for these lazy bums. On Nights 4 and 5 though, Chica becomes active and will begin looking for something to snack on. So you have to lure her back to the garbage area by purposely trashing orders in order to keep things running smoothly. So if we move the camera away from the office and into the disposal area of Night 4 and 5, we can now find Chica hanging out on this pile of garbage pizza. As soon as we dump any number of ingredients, Chica will instantly wake up and begin moving. It's very strange seeing her directly though, because she practically snaps between her poses with very little animation in between. If we're not careful though, she'll leave the room and interrupt our poor Staffbots who are just trying to make a living. When this occurs, she'll warp into one of these warehouse sections and replace the bot working inside. But they don't disappear completely. The bot Chica replaces is actually moved outside of her office, floating to our left where we can't see them. They'll remain here until Chica either moves on to another location, or we send her back to the trash room by dumping ingredients. When this happens, you can see here that the bot instantly appears in the usual spot again, and Chica moves back to the trash room. On night 5, the bot who strolls by our front window is replaced by the Nightmarian version instead. Typically, this bot gives you an order to make, and missing the timer will count as one of your strikes before failing the minigame. The Nightmarian version skips this though, and it goes straight for the jump scare if we fail to make the executive order on time. If we do not keep Chica in check, she'll eventually end up at her office, where she appears inside the catwalk and flings herself onto our window. After staring at you for an uncomfortably long time, she'll make her way into the room, similar to the Staffbots. Just like the bots, she'll also pass by the player completely, but she still triggers a jump scare regardless. Now let's head into the final game of staff only, Endo Warehouse. In this level, all you have to do is play a simple memory game in order to teach this Endo some basic behaviors. Each time you finish a set of cards, a harder puzzle will appear, making it harder to finish the puzzle without making mistakes. During this test, multiple Endos will appear in the room and try to reach you, only stopping when you look at them or finishing the round. After each puzzle is completed, you will successfully complete the minigame. So with the lights flicked on, I decided to check out the map now that we can see it more clearly. This was a mistake. The room is bright and colorful, with cheerful murals painted on the walls and ceiling. What's terrifying is the hooks and chains hanging from the ceiling. Some of these look like machine hooks meant for moving equipment around warehouses, and the others are straight up meat hooks with Staffbot heads hanging on them. In front of the player is a small playhouse with a TV on top, and laying against it is this poor Staffbot who is taking a nap? Yeah, we'll go with that. He is completely and entirely destroyed, with giant cracks and scratches in his body and head. The screen on top of this house has a constant loop of Moondrop playing on it though, which is pretty neat. Now, as for the Endos who approach the player throughout the night, you'll see that they just appear in the back corners of the level, where it will be hard for the player to see them. I didn't see them out of bounds before appearing in the level either, so I'm assuming they're being spawned in as they're needed instead. These characters slowly creep up to you while you're attempting the puzzle, but I wanted to see if they're really approaching the player or if their pathing is predetermined. To test this theory, I warped the player away from their usual position and into the back corner of the room. The Endos still kept on their usual warpath though, and they'll keep going until they reach the player's workspace and a jump scare occurs. The creepiest thing about this is that the Endos go full exorcist mode. They're programmed to always look at the player, and they won't stop even if that means rotating their head a full 180 degrees. I wasn't satisfied yet though, and so I wanted to see if I could stop them by setting up a few pitfall traps in the room. Apparently gravity is just a suggestion, and the Endos walked across the gaping holes in the floor without even thinking twice about it. Things just kept getting scarier though. As soon as a jump scare is triggered, the bots will look straight down at the floor, and this is because the player camera was moving inside the double-faced sphere out of bounds. And, of course, we can watch the jump scare take place in bullet time. There's not much to this minigame, so I wanted to talk about something I found while exploring the game's files. This is an unimplemented test map for Bonnie Bowl, simply called Bowling Test. On top of this platform, there's a small lane and ball return, but I'm not sure about those pins. Instead of bowling pins, we have a set of rectangles standing at the end of the lane. We can't knock any of the pins down, unfortunately, and this is because we're unable to throw the ball, although we can still pick it up and drop it. Doing this results in the numbers up above having a corresponding 0 added beneath them, and so we can assume that the game has a semi-functional frame system at this time. We're currently viewing this in flat mode, so there's a chance that this may work properly in VR, but that's only a hunch. I'm sure by now you've noticed that Monty is just asserting his dominance on top of this area too. He is in a T-pose, just kind of sliding on a set path, crossing in and out of the bowling lane as he does. I assume this was done to test collisions between the bowling ball and what would eventually be the game's various obstacles, but again, I can only theorize since I wasn't in the room when this test area was built. But with that, that's everything I found hidden off camera and out of bounds in Help Wanted 2's staff-only minigames. Now we're heading into the last set of minigames, which are themed around Sister Location. We'll also be taking a look behind the scenes at Princess Quest 4 and the update for Secret of the Mimic. So booting up the first Sister Location minigame, below our gallery, there's a fair bit of checkered flowing between you and the exit. The objective here is to crawl through the darkness and reach the exit, avoiding Ballora as she dances by. Mini-arenas will appear occasionally, but giving them a good toss usually does the trick. Although, the same can't be said for Biddy Bap, who waits for you in the darkness, jumps scaring you if you stray too far from your path. You have 5 minutes to reach the other side, and moving with Ballora present means death. So don't do that. So if we switch the lights on and begin looking around, you'll see that this map looks very different from what you might expect. The entities we'll interact with here are already loaded in before the minigame even begins. So a couple of mini-arenas are currently waiting just out of sight. They'll disappear before the timer starts, but for the time being, they're chilling in the middle of the platform, frozen in their dancing animation. There are multiple copies of Biddy-Bap here as well, one on both sides of the player and one behind. These guys are here in case the player tries to stray from their path, and they actually never leave your vicinity. We'll be seeing more of these enemies in just a second, but first I should probably address Ballora, the Balloras. There are 2 versions of this enemy loaded in currently, the one on stage who disappears as we start walking, and this version who's actively dancing it up out of bounds. This version isn't unloaded like the other because this Ballora is the copy that dances by when we're making our swift escape. She just endlessly loops her animation here until she's called elsewhere in the map. You'd think it'd be easy to spot these characters by simply turning and moving in their direction, but that's where this game's unique movement mechanic comes to the rescue. I felt that the floor we're sliding across seemed a bit smaller than what I imagined it would be, since it didn't even connect to the other side of the level. As soon as I started moving, all of these oddities made a lot more sense. Ballora's stage started sliding away, but the player never actually ended up moving. It turns out that we remain completely still throughout this entire minigame, and the flooring beneath your feet moves instead. The same goes for the exit we're desperately trying to reach. Instead of making our way closer to it, the exit slowly inches closer to our platform whenever the player moves in its direction. Eventually, it'll arrive on top of our little platform and we can head inside. Speaking of which, we're not limited to moving forwards and backwards. We can actually move in a full range of motion. The floor textures will move in any direction we move in, but that doesn't mean we're home free. The Biddy-Bap trio moves in relation to the player's movements, and so we can watch from up above as they slide closer and further away depending on which direction we're moving. Now let's direct our attention to the star of the show. Ballora seems to just appear from the shadows during our trek to the finish line, but where is she coming from? After getting far enough into the level, Ballora vanishes from an auto location out of bounds and thrusts herself into the spotlight. She appears far enough out of your sight that you can't see this taking place, but after she warps, she begins spinning into your area. If you're completely still, she'll move on without incident and vanish, but she's not gone completely. Looking closer, you can see the dust cloud from her foot still present on the map, but she's been temporarily hidden until she's triggered to return. Something I found a bit strange is that after warping to the exit on the other side, I tried moving only to realize that the floor was no longer sliding like before. The exit was completely static as well, as the minigame's logic was broken by me moving the player in a way the devs weren't anticipating. With that said, we can take a quick look at Ballora's jump scare before moving on to the next minigame. And yes, it's just as terrifying in bullet time. Now let's check out the following minigame, Breaker Room. Once here, you'll be set up behind a panel with multiple levers and meters, switching the breakers on in the right order to fill the gauges. While managing this job, Funtime Freddy will leave his platform and try his best to stop you, forcing you to use the megaphone in order to stop him. This back and forth lasts until all the gauges are full, and once complete, the night will be beaten. This minigame has a hard mode variant, where in it, Endo takes Funtime Freddy's place. The minigame plays out mostly the same, the only difference being Endo is much faster and more aggressive. Jumping back in time, I pulled the camera back to see if there's anything more to this level, but it's only this small room and nothing more. This room is full of wiring and pipes, but not all the technology here makes sense. Like for instance, this power strip that just doesn't have a cord attached to it. The room is full of these things, and I can't say a surge protector like this will do you much good. It doesn't impact the game in any way, but it's still funny enough to mention. So Funtime Freddy will move throughout the room as we mess with the levers, but all of his movements are obscured by the room going completely dark. With the lights on, Freddy skips the whole walking thing and just teleports around instead. The poses he changes to aren't completely consistent though, at least not all of him. Funtime Freddy's head is programmed to face the player at all times, and if we move it into a different position before Freddy moves, it will break his posing a bit. Because of this, we've basically splinter celled him, breaking his neck so his head is fully backwards and facing the other side of the room. It's not only his head either. Freddy's eyes are also programmed the same way, but unlike his head, they don't change position when Freddy moves. They'll follow the camera actively, including rolling back into his own noodle. It's actually really creepy, knowing there's nowhere we can go where his eyes won't be able to follow. During this minigame, there are several places Freddy can warp to as he approaches our workstation. There's only one position he can enter where we aren't able to see him, but where does he go? During this time, Funtime Freddy is moved out of bounds, where we'd never be able to find him. He's floating just beyond the wall, but still follows a player's position with his head like a total weirdo. As you probably come to expect, he'll warp back inside when the time comes, but he kinda messed himself up in the process. If we let him get close enough, he'll approach the player, triggering a jump scare if we don't ward him off. In this sequence, his head follows the camera in real time instead of snapping between poses. Now, there isn't much else to look at in the hard mode night that we didn't already see, but more than anything, I want to highlight how funny Endo looks with the lights on. His menacing appearance seems oddly chipper when lit up, and his usually terrifying silhouette instead looks like an endoskeleton covered in metal spaghetti. When he warped over to the pipes on our left, his happy expression changed to what I can only describe as maximum sus. I'm not completely sure what has him so suspicious, but whatever it is we're doing, he's definitely onto us. When Yendo approaches the player's station, his walk cycle is surprisingly funny. During this time I also managed to break his head too. Moving the camera behind him results in this flipping motion, and so I figured if we can't destroy him, giving him whiplash was the next best option. And as we let him reach us, we can take a look at his jump scare and bullet time. That's it for the breaker room though, so now let's dive into Office Private Room. Fans of Sister Location will definitely recognize this minigame since it's heavily based on the fake ending's Private Room. Once the game begins, Enter becomes active, and a classic FNAF style night of survival follows suit. You'll have to check the cameras frequently to find your slippery enemy, closing the doors whenever they arrive at your office to avoid certain doom. There's more to this night than closing doors and watching cameras though. Power is in limited supply, and running out is bad news, so managing your power is just as important as avoiding Entered. At 6 AM, the night comes to an end, and you can move on to night 2. So we're starting this level, I moved the camera out of bounds for a better look at this map's construction. In doing so, I found this handsome fellow hanging out just beyond the back wall of the office. It's a default textured model of what I assume to be a human, and they're currently T-posing on a small circular platform. This knockoff member of the Fighting Polygon team has 2 rectangular objects by their side as well. If we look closer at the text, you'll see that these are actually measuring sticks, both indicating 6 feet. This asset was most likely used to help the devs scale the environment accurately during development. By using this tool, it's a lot easier to construct the map with consistent proportions and keep things from going wonky in the process. This is only a likely scenario though, since hey, I didn't make the game. Now, there's something else the developers left behind that I'm positive you've noticed by now. The totally massive pieces of text floating around the level. By zooming way out, you'll see that the rest of this level is not connected to the office as you'd first expect. Each of the rooms we view through our camera system are instead mapped out using these text labels, and the rooms themselves are held elsewhere. Beneath this section of the level, it says White Box Area, so it's possible that all this text wasn't only added here after the fact, but used as a sort of guide when constructing the rest of the map during the whiteboxing phase to block it out. It could also be referring to this much larger platform where the rest of this level is located. Completely separate from the office we play in, there's a platform with a duplicate text layout. In this case, the levels mentioned in the dev text are actually present, and what you're looking at here are the rooms seen through our cameras. This is confirmed further by the devs writing, use this space for camera rooms. So that one's not really up for debate. However, there are 2 sets of developer text here in this level that I can't quite figure out. First, there's this one that reads Hidden Room. It's hovering above a platform occupied by a few enemies. But I don't know if this text is referring to this area or something else. From what I can tell, there isn't another room that this could be referencing, but if you think you know, let me know in the comments. The other bit of text that puzzles me is this one found in front of the player's office. It reads, Characters with unique requirements, Bonnet. In the original game that this level is based on, Bonnet can appear during the custom night if you ever switched on. To my knowledge though, Bonnet doesn't make an appearance in this minigame, only her blue counterpart Bonbon. I wasn't sure if Bonnet made an appearance in an Easter egg or something, but I never encountered her or found her when searching around the map, so I can only assume this isn't the case. This could also reference a scrapped interaction we were meant to have with Bonnet in this level, and it got axed at some point during development. Either way, the devs left some pretty cool stuff behind for us to stumble across. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the level is broken up into multiple parts instead of being one singular structure. feature. Every single room we view through the cameras is stored in another location, entirely disconnected from your office. By heading through these areas, we can get a much better look at them, though you'll quickly find that they're not all in one piece. Because we only view them through the perspective of a static camera, pun intended, they don't make a whole lot of logical sense. The biggest leap of logic is the complete lack of walls in most of these rooms. However, the camera either doesn't see these spots, or visual tricks are used to hide the fact that they're mostly incomplete. Fortunately, with all this confusion, the devs made sure we knew this was a vent. It's so important, in fact, that they reminded us twice. It wouldn't be a FNAF game without nightmarish mechanical beings, and so I found M.X.E.S hanging out in the very back of the level. It's actually kind of funny how small they are compared to the rest of the level, but still as terrifying as ever. This enemy doesn't actually walk through the level though, but instead, when the cameras flicker, they'll warp to their next position. This teleporting motion isn't the only way enemies can get around though. As you can see, when M.X.E.S reached our office, they warped across the void and into our small section of this map on the other side. As this happens, they'll appear just out of our sight, turning the corner with a fully fleshed out walking animation as opposed to teleporting like before. M.X.E.S strutted over to our door, so I made it a little harder by closing the door in their face. They kept walking until they were practically touching our office door, freezing in this idle pose for a bit before unloading for the time being. At this point, I want to take another look at M.X.E.'s jump scare sequence, but when looking beneath this level, I found something just a bit strange. In the two-faced sphere, usually reserved for jump scares, I found, Glamrock Freddy? He was frozen in one frame of his jump scare, but why is Freddy here at all? This animatronic doesn't make an appearance during this minigame whatsoever, so it's a bit strange that this jump scare model is found here. If M.X.E.S reaches the player though, this model instantly switches over to the correct animatronic while the sequence plays out. Heading into the first Hardmode night, Office Puppet Master will occupy the same location as before. Only the enemies inside have changed. We must now defend our office from Ballora, Bidybap, and an army of mini-arenas. Using the cameras, you'll have to keep track of these threats, issuing a controlled shock whenever these mischievous little critters arrive to cause a ruckus. The minis can also pop into your office and block your buttons, meaning you won't be able to close the doors needed for your survival. So first and foremost, let's head back out to the void space behind the scenes. Beneath the hidden room text I mentioned earlier, we can find a platform with a bunch of character models on it. In the very back corner, there's a collection of mini arenas T-posing in what I can only describe as their attack formation. They're lined up in a few rows, with the leader of the pack standing behind the rest. The 5 up front are pretty small, but the one in the back is much larger in comparison. These characters serve different purposes inside this level too. After starting the minigame, I waited until I found a mini arena somewhere on the security cameras, and then headed back out to that platform to see if anything changed. When I got there, one of our wooden friends here was obviously missing, and it was none other than the big boss in the back. We can move our camera through the map to find them occupying one of these rooms. What's interesting to me is that after returning to this platform a bit later on, they were moved in front of the others instead of behind them. As for the smaller mini arenas, they function mostly the same as the big one. When they arrive in your office to block your buttons, the minis, seen outside the map on top of this platform, will be moved into the office. By moving the camera back out here, you can see that one of these creatures has gone missing. Of course, Ballora is here as well, and like M.X.E.S, we can find her throughout the various locations seen on the cameras. She functions almost identically as well, warping between locations as she heads for our office and appearing beyond our doors. Ballora has a particular flair though, and instead of stumbling to the player, she dances there instead. Unlike M.X.E.S though, Ballora doesn't simply vanish after reaching a closed door. Instead, she starts spinning away from our office and back into the other parts of the map. After leaving the player's sight, she then stops for a bit once she's exited the map completely, unloading a little bit after. Now as for Bidybap, this character functions a bit differently than the others. At the start of the game, we can't actually find them anywhere within this map, and only after the night plays out for a bit will they show up. If you don't react quickly enough with a good old zap, Bidybap will enter the vents and make a sprint for your office. Just like the other animatronics, if we block the door before they get inside, they'll vanish as soon as they reach the door. There's not much else to see here though, so let's keep things moving forward and check out the next level, Office Funtime Gang. On this night, the Funtime animatronics will take the stage and completely turn things on their head. First, Chica's cupcake is now hanging out on her desk and can be moved to keep her from reaching your office. If she does, you'll have to give it to her to avoid a jump scare. But this means a second visit from the chicken is imminent. Funtime Foxy is here too, and they function like the classic Foxy we know from FNAF 1. Funtime Freddy and Bonbon are present as well, and Bonbon can attack from all 3 entrances to her office. So we're starting this night, I move the camera to the main hallway to find Chica Chica hanging out with an empty plate and staring at the non-existent camera. Something else you can see here is the impromptu Pirate's Cove used for Funtime Foxy. Speaking of which, let's take a closer look at this animatronic and how they function. As I said before, Funtime Foxy functions pretty much the same as the original in FNAF 1. As the night moves forward, this character slowly inches their way out through the curtains and into the hallway, staring up at the camera because it wouldn't be as creepy if it didn't. There's a period where this animatronic is completely missing though, and during this time they vanish for just a moment, reappearing in one of the two hallways on either side of the player's office. For the moment, they're actually frozen in one frame of the running animation, hidden behind the wall of whichever hallway they've chosen to run through. Once the animation starts, Foxy actually sprints through the wall, running past the cameras and disappearing yet again. After vanishing, Foxy appears outside the player's line of sight in the hallway and beelines for the door. If the player closes the door at this time, Funtime Foxy warps all the way across the level and back into Pirate's Cove, starting this sequence over from the beginning. Another enemy we'll face here is Funtime Freddy and his good friend Bonbon. When I found Freddy, he was hanging out in one of the level's side closets and staring up at the camera. As you might expect, his right hand is not a hand, and Bonbon isn't attached to it either. Something I found neat is how Freddy hides his right hand in the cameras. In every spot I saw him appear, he's purposely hiding his right arm so you can't see whether Bonbon is present or not. Now when Bonbon reaches your office, you can see him pop out from around the corner and wave his arms at you. From another angle, you can see there's nothing holding him up at all, and during this time he's just floating a few feet off the ground. The same thing applies regardless of where he's attacking from, like for instance the vent in the middle of your office. In this case he's hovering upside down and glaring at us through the vent. When Bonbon attacks, he'll reel back and then throw himself at the player, flying through the vent and disappearing like the other animatronics we've observed. Now in the final night of the office minigame, Job Interview, the entire flow of gameplay has changed. We're now playing Make-Believe with Circus Baby and her Plushbaby companions. Instead of surviving until 6 AM like the other nights, there are instead 3 challenges awaiting you here. First, Plushbaby will begin appearing on the cameras, requiring a controlled shock to chase her off. Next, 3 Plushbabies will appear around you, so you need to shine your flashlight on them to prevent them from reaching you. Finally, there's a standard game of flashlight tag, meaning you'll have to spot Plushbaby and chase her off before she can jump scare you. So starting the night over from the beginning, I moved the camera out of bounds since there's something interesting hidden beneath the map that I didn't mention earlier. On all 4 nights that we play through, Circus Baby is just hanging out in the void space. She's just T-posing out here endlessly, which is strange considering she only makes an appearance on the last night. The creepiest part is that her head always faces the player, even though her idle position is so far away from the player's position. Now on the same platform where we found the mini-arenas earlier, there are 2 rows of Plushbaby lined up and waiting to make their attack. It's terrifying because they also stare at the player from beyond the map's walls. Even though you're tucked away in your office, these enemies are always watching from areas you'll never see. A haunting secret you can't unlearn. From what I can tell, these characters have designated jobs that they'll serve throughout the night. This red copy of Plushbaby, for instance, is the only one who doesn't stare at the player from behind the scenes. Their aversion to eye contact is impersonal though, because this version is the only one moved when she appears in your security cameras. After being moved somewhere into the map, giving her a controlled shock results in Plushbaby returning to this platform. Only now she's been moved to the side, like the mini-arena was earlier. The others are used for their respective challenges, like red light, green light, and hide and seek. As these minigames play out, the Plushbabies needed for them are moved into the map, but they aren't always unloaded afterwards. For some reason, the red light, green light copies will be moved back onto this platform out of bounds. Once here, they begin running off into the void, stopping in the same place, and fusing into this nightmarish, multi-faced Plushbaby. When Circus Baby enters our office during this night, the model that approaches our door is the same one found out of bounds on all 4 nights. I wanted to take a closer look at how she delivers our victory ice cream though. When she nears, we can take a look inside of Circus Baby's model to find a black sphere occupying the center. This arm will suddenly appear from within said sphere, reaching through it to deliver our frozen treat and retracting once we've taken it. The arm used for this sequence is moved underneath our office at this point, floating just out of sight before unloading entirely. After the night is beaten, we can see that a black barrier surrounds the player's office as the victory screen appears. That pretty much wraps up the sister location levels, and in turn, we've officially essentially covered every minigame in Help Wanted 2. But we're not done yet. If the player manages to collect each of the memory dolls hidden within certain minigames, a Faz token is obtained, which grants you access to the Princess Quest 4 arcade machine. When we boot up the game, we appear in a dark room with the cabinet in front of the player. After being granted a sword, you'll head through the doors and begin exploring this spooky dungeon full of enemies. As you move forward, you'll light torches and open chests, eventually pulling the greatest fourth wall break of all time and appearing in the same room the player is currently playing. So after we initially start up Princess Quest, we're moved to a completely separate map from the hub we were just in. This room is occupied by nothing more than the arcade machine and a singular door, but the only way out is forward, especially since the door was a total sham. Moving the camera through the ceiling is when things get even more weird, since we'll find a video game version of the room we're already hanging out in. As a matter of fact, all the levels we'll play through in Princess Quest are placed out here in a single row, aside from the cabinet room, at least. Each of them are currently active too, with the monsters inside moving about and all their animations fully intact. These game screens are stored outside the map, and they're essentially projected onto the arcade cabinet inside the map. We don't even really need to play from inside the level either, since we're able to control a character from out of bounds and watch things play out in real time. When we're exploring during this minigame, we'll pass through doors and instantly load into the next map. When viewed from out of bounds, our character is actually warping to the adjacent room as the screen shifts on the cabinet inside. Some of the areas in this minigame are hidden in the darkness and only become accessible after the necessary torches are lit up. These Zelda-style secret platforms are actually present the entire time. You just can't see them typically. If you look at these areas from out of bounds, you can see that this trick is pulled off in a pretty simple way. A black panel is placed above them until they're supposed to appear, and when they do, the barrier is removed and the floor beneath it becomes accessible. Something else you can only see from out here is the particles used when an enemy is defeated. While we can see these from our regular perspective, what you can't see is that the pixelated explosion is a fully 3D effect. Even though this is the case, it still appears completely flat when viewing it through the machine. After reaching the end of your quest, the princess will arrive in the room with you in a meta twist nobody could see coming. While their placement in the map is locked, so they move in unison, these entities are not direct copies of each other. While in the minigame we can move around in all four directions, the princess in the room with you will always turn to face you. As soon as you swing your sword while near the player, a white pixelated half sphere appears in front of you, blocking your view as the map prepares to swap. So after your sight returns, you'll take the sword from the arcade machine as it appears in your hand. Moving forward, you'll realize you've now arrived in a castle thematically similar to the one in the arcade game. You'll eventually exit the castle, lighting these graves in the correct order to open a hidden room. You can now grab a secret Bonnie mask and trade it to the old man up ahead for a glitch trap plush. From here, you take an elevator up to a giant claw machine, giving Moon your new plush with a massive Vanny looking inside at you. Dropping the plush, Vanny picks up glitch trap from the machine and crushes him, fading into the distance as the credits roll. So after we've arrived inside the world of Princess Quest, we'll grab the sword from the arcade cabinet and begin our adventure. What's really cool is watching the sword appear from thin air as we pick it up. Also, we can destroy the character we were just playing as using the sword, which is also pretty neat in bullet time. In the hallway up ahead, you'll fight enemies, warping across these holes in the floor to move forward in the minigame. Each of these pits has a black barrier that would be hard to notice during a typical playthrough. These are here to obstruct your view, since you can easily see the rest of the map out of bounds without these objects in place. After exploring the large castle area, you'll come to this sort of staircase that leads you down to the bottom floor. Down here, there's a giant pit that you, once again, can't see the bottom of. Surprisingly, this one isn't bottomless like the other, but instead it comes to what looks like a dugout hole in the ground. Falling in still wouldn't feel good, but hey, at least you aren't falling into infinity. When we step out into the courtyard ahead, we can take a look at this castle area from another angle and see just how big it is compared to the other rooms we've explored thus far. I saw something pretty interesting while I was out here though. While you're outside in the cemetery, you can see large clouds passing by in the distance, and this is done using these seemingly endless projections. There are multiple sets of these clouds at varying heights and angles, and it's really weird to look at it from this angle. When continuing forward, you'll access a hidden room using the gravestones in the middle of the path. Ain't nobody got time for puzzles, so I deleted the hidden doors instead, which surprisingly let me access the chest anyway. I was able to grab the mask without lighting a single torch, allowing me to trade it to the old man up ahead as expected. Wanted. After trading for the Glitch Trap plush, we can head up the elevator. This elevator is already out of place compared to the rest of the castle, but it's even stranger from out of bounds. It's a giant cylinder with multiple sets of lights throughout. It also rises up into a gigantic claw machine. Although it looks fully modeled from the inside, it doesn't have a base beneath the basket where the toys are sitting. In front of the machine, there's a massive Vanny looking inside with her hands on the glass. She's twice as big as the machine we're currently standing in, and it's kind of intimidating just how huge this character is compared to the rest of the level. After a moment, Moon will drop down from up above and hold out his hand, waiting for the player to hand the Glitch Trap plush over. Once we've handed it over, Moon will float over to the prize bin and drop the toy down inside, doing some sick flips before flying straight up and through the ceiling. Vanny then reaches her hand down to grab her prize, but there isn't anything in her palm at first. When she begins lifting her hand, Glitch Trap will appear standing in the center right before entering the player's line of sight. This tiny rabbit looks completely terrified, staring straight up at his giant captor as she raises her hand and brings it down on his head. He stops her for just a second, but her hand closes anyway, with Glitch Trap clipping through it and quickly unloading. The deed is now done, and so Vanny backs through a huge two-faced barrier while waving at the player, unloading herself as the credits begin to roll. That pretty much wraps up Princess Quest, but we're not finished yet. After an update called Secret of the Mimic, the player can now enter the minigame Office Puppet Master and input a code to obtain this tiger plush. This allows you to view the Mimic through the hub's model viewer, and when throwing an object at them, a door will then be opened behind you. A puzzle is placed on a table, and solving it spawns a large gift shop in this open space. If we take our mask off in this area, the gift shop disappears, and a van containing M.X.E.S appears instead. After inputting the code found on the gift shop's mailbox, the entity appears from inside the van and stares you down. The doors then close, and the van quickly leaves. So if we turn back time and re-enter this puzzle room, we can zoom out to find that this area is nothing more than a flat platform. There isn't anything hidden out of bounds in this level, and this almost makes it more creepy. Until we finish the puzzle, it's just a single piece of floor, with nothing hidden behind the scenes. When looking at the table, we can take our mask off and put it back on to see the puzzle changing between its two versions, one being the van, and the other the gift shop we spawn. This transition is seamless too, and we can even see the mask appearing on the table at the same time. As soon as the puzzle is completed, we can watch as the gift shop blinks into existence in the distance. With this huge building now present, let's take a closer look at it. For those of you wondering, the building doesn't extend past what we can see from the front. There is nothing inside for us to see since there's no inside to speak of, and the building just stops on the other side. Something I found kind of strange is this window on the upper right side. For some reason, it seems to be actively raining inside of the building. There's obviously water flowing from the inside of this pane, but I can't even begin to imagine why. What's weirder is that the other windows have water on them too. At least, that's what it looks like. It's not animated on this side of the building though, so I'm not sure why the other is. If we take the mask off again, you can watch as the gift shop is temporarily unloaded and the van takes its place. On the front of the vehicle, you can see a logo that simply says company name, but I'm more interested in the van's interior. Taking a look inside, you can see that there is no driver present, but it is fully modeled inside despite this. The open space in the van is mostly taken up by the M.X.E.S, but there are no digital rabbits in sight, at least not yet. The entity will appear behind the van and clip their hands through this rusty machine. Their motions are super stiff and rigid, which is a lot more noticeable in bullet time. They then stick their head through the back of the van, but before they reach the player, they're pulled back inside. The doors slam shut as the entity vanishes, and the van drives off the side of the map and out of bounds. After it unloads, the game's credits will roll once again. Back in the hub, we can now view a character called Jackie through the model viewer, and she's a massive jack-in-the-box straight out of your worst nightmare. This character has bright red pigtails and a speaker in her mouth, and of course, long stretchy arms like you'd expect from a jack-in-the-box. As far as I know at this time, she doesn't serve any further purpose than teasing the model itself for Secret of the Mimic. But with that, that's everything I found hidden behind the scenes in the sister location minigames and Princess Quest, thus concluding the entirety of Help Wanted 2. I hope you enjoyed this game-breaking video, and I'll see all of you really soon. Thanks for watching, and cheers!